Hey everyone, welcome to the show. We're just continuing. I decided to do a part two of toxic society because our society is getting to where it's a little out of control. And a lot of people will point to a lot of different things, but the thing that I think is the biggest cause of this, and it's with our kids and how we're raising them and how we're getting further and further from just common sense. And everybody sees this. This isn't a great secret. People talk about the kids today, and I know even whenever I was a kid, how wild the kids were, and it's way worse than that is today. You take something like the school shootings. They're horrible. They're horrific. Whenever I was a kid, we had kids that went hunting before school. It was not uncommon for there to be a gun rack with a rifle in it by one of the kids that was, driving age. And we never thought nothing of it. Now, we have an epidemic of kids killing themselves. Before that, we had an epidemic of adults killing themselves. You think about gang violence. You think about the gang culture. And it's just people killing people over what? Over self-serving ideas, status. And we've gotten so far away from it. And I still fall back to looking at other countries, that are much poorer, and how much more value they place on themselves, on their families, to how we've gotten in the United States. And there's other countries, but I live here. I live in the United States. So I want to pick on the United States and how far we've fallen. Because we've lost those values. Just this week we had a huge snowstorm. And the coolest thing that I, viewed with this was just families, having a good time. It's not worrying about, this, that, or the other. There was families that were getting together and sledding, and we don't have a lot of snow here. We might get snow. I think the last snow we had, I looked up, was in 2018 in the state of North Carolina. And I'm talking near the coast. I'm not talking inland. That's a little different. But nonetheless, it was a rare sight, and families were enjoying it. And to me, I look at that and I just think how rare that is in today's culture, where families are, for the most part, trying to get away from each other. And it's from infighting, and all of it stems from selfishness. It all does. All of it stems from one of those things like money. I mean, we ought to be ashamed of ourselves. Anymore, the common thing is when somebody passes away, everybody's fighting over their stuff, and you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You're fighting over money and I got to get mine and all that. You didn't earn that. Your parents did. They're choosing to pass that on to you. So that's one thing that's pretty dang selfish that I see. I experienced stuff like that similar in my own family. And then, you talk about it and it's, like our neighbors, my neighbor just went through it and had something similar go on in his family. It's just stuff. And people want more, or they believe themselves to need more. And that's where we've come, where before most people would be sad over the passing of their loved one, not be like scavengers looking to pick up whatever they can from that person. It's kind of like whenever if you're in wartime, or if you're in a primitive time and somebody passes and then you're picking over their body for their stuff. Oh, they've got a good pair of shoes. I need shoes. I'm going to take their shoes. Oh, they've got a good jacket. I want to take the jacket. Instead of remembering that was a person. And that's really what we do in society today. We have social media where it is a magnifying glass on everything. Disinformation, slander. Social media, if you're reporting incorrect practices, that's bearing false witness. That is, that's a biblical concept of dishonesty, is bearing false witness. Passing rumors, cutting people down, and it's we dealt with it some when I was a kid. If you didn't get your clothes at some place, if you got for instance, if you got your clothes at Walmart, kids would make fun of you in school if you don't wear name brand this, name brand that. Your kids would make fun of you. And I luckily in my living today, I had a mom and a father that taught me the difference between brand name and just stuff. If it suits your needs, it's good. It's still good. It doesn't matter what the brand is, because look at it now. You can go pay $60 for a holy pair of jeans, and if you were in a real situation, they do you no good. But you could buy you a pair of jeans and put holes in them yourselves if you're following trends. But the reality of it is, the brand name is what everybody sees. Almost like we've become a society based on brand name, based on status, based on that. Now, what does that sound like? That sounds like a caste system. And when you have a caste system, then you're in a class and that you never are able to get out of, hardly. You see that in a lot of societies, old societies. It was very common in primitive society that the class of the family. You see that from kings and queens and human god kings, like we talked about with Nimrod. But I'll tell you, we had all these temptations. We have the power to overcome this if we start getting back to the basics. And if you think, all right, Jesus was born perfect, but he was tempted first. And this is detailed in the Bible. If you go to the Bible and you read in Matthew 4, you'll read about the temptation of Christ. And it's not the movie. It's nothing like the movie. If you follow movies and stuff, it's just something that comes to mind as we had a horrible movie called The Last Temptation of Christ, and it was very demonic. But if you go to 4 and read, and this is after Jesus's baptism, and you got to realize that when you get baptized and you wash away your old life and then you're new, there's a time of great testing that comes after that. You're switching your life over. You're switching from bad life practices to more biblical practices. You're getting in line with what Christ is calling you to do, what God's calling you to do, what the Holy Spirit is convicting you to do to live a better, more fruitful life. But Jesus goes and he says, and then Jesus, led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Now, the wilderness in this situation, probably, it would be considered the desert because of the land. But the wilderness is more of a metaphor for that is used more with life. When you go into the wilderness, you're going to be alone. You're going to walk a path by yourself. And Jesus is going out, and it's, Jesus is going through a time of fasting. So after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, if you're the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. But Jesus speaks with wisdom and says, it is written, a man shall not live on bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of God. See, Jesus is using the word to protect himself from temptation. So he is using Old Testament teaching. See, the Old Testament's still valid, even though we have the New Testament. Jesus is reinforcing, but personalizing the Old Testament laws, Old Testament practices. Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. If you are the Son of God, he said, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. And Jesus answered, it is also written, do not put the Lord your God to tests. So what's it saying? So here again, Jesus is referring to, we pray to God, but you got to understand God has a plan for you. He has a perfect plan for you. And whenever you say things like, God, do this, or put God in a position, then you've got to understand, one, that's a stupid test. To jump off a building and say, I can fly, man was not built to fly without the use of equipment. We can't fly on our own. So this is a stupid test. And God's not going to be provoked like that. It's the wrong, it's self-glorification, because you're provoking God for your own self so that you can boast about it. Again, the devil took him to the very high mountains and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. This will be given to you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. And Jesus said, away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. So you can see there's several temptations here. These temptations relate well to our lives as Christians. It's tempting to want to be the big man on campus. It's tempting to want the adoration of others. And that's what this is referring to. He's saying, one, worship Satan and follow his practices, one. But two, Satan's got a carrot, and he always does. Satan always has something to dangle in front of you that you may want. Think of the crossroads stories of where musicians sell their souls. That's what Satan's asking Jesus to do here, is sell your soul for fame and money. Look at Hollywood, how it is basically, figuratively sold its soul. It is a place of broken dreams. There's a lot of money in Hollywood, but it's fleeting. It's worldly. Satan is trying to sell you a worldly thing for your eternal soul. You should value yourself to want more than just what the earth withers and dies, but God's eternal. So if you put things into that lens, living for the Lord is what you really should be doing. Really how you should be living your lives. And if you love the Lord, then you'll follow his ways. So so the things that I see, and this really stems from a couple weeks ago. I was talking to a gal that was in the gas station I go to get coffee each morning. Yes, it's great gas station coffee. Don't knock it until you try it. But some gas stations have great coffee, and it's affordable. And we were talking, and she was from another country. She's from Haiti. And she was just talking about the differences of adjusting to America and how our kids are so different than the kids in other countries. Kids are taught to respect their parents. The parents, along with trusted people, all together are raising their children. So you got to consider this in a lot of countries, and this is still practiced today. It's just not practiced in America anymore. If you were representing your family whenever you were out. So if you were doing things that you ought not to be doing, then you were disrespecting your family. You were disrespecting your mother and your father because they raised you better than that. If you were out misrepresenting your family, then it was looked down upon. And in this way, the community would be raising you too, because I don't know if you've ever had this saying, but my parents told this to me was, we have eyes everywhere, which means they know everybody. So when you're out doing something you're not, you never know who's watching. So act with good conduct. Don't be a drunkard. Don't be somebody that is being mean to others, being a bully, self-glorifying yourself and putting other people down, stepping on people to get what you want. Do things honorably. Be a good person is basically what they're saying. They're not asking you to be a super athlete, a super good at this, that, or the other. They're asking you to be a good person. Be respectable in your community. And that's what they mean. And the Bible reinforces a lot of this. And I want to bring that into light because the Bible calls our children. It says this is in Ephesians, and it's 6. It says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you, that you may enjoy a long life on earth." All right. Sounds pretty straightforward. It's telling you to honor. And in honor means respect. Respect your parents. Take into consideration what they have told you and tried to teach you. You got to remember that your parents generally are going to have your best interest in mind. Now, there's a caveat to this because a lot of parents misuse this. I had a friend that misused this to control their kids, and they weren't the greatest parents. The caveat is, and there's always a caveat in the Bible. There's always something that is putting a rule around this so it can't be misused. And it says, and so if you read in 6:4, fathers, do not aspirate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. In other words, fathers, don't be jerks. Don't misuse your authority. Train them up in the ways of the Lord. So, right here, they're talking about bring godly teaching into this. Bring solid foundations. But as you can see, in our society today, we've fallen prey to things. And one of them is that we want to hear what we want to hear. We don't want to hear anything that offends us, that might take away from what we think we ought to know and what we think we know is right. And so on in Timothy, 2 Timothy, if you read in 4, and Timothy talks a lot about the end times. He's got a lot of stuff that talks about how things will be in the last days before Christ comes back. And he says in 4:3, with great, this is just before this. I'm going to start a little bit. It says, I give you charge, preach the word, be preached in season, or be prepared in season, and out of correct rebuke and encourage with great patience and careful instructions. So Timothy is telling anybody in a leadership role, because this is actually pointed more at the church, but it relates to this. He's telling them to discipline. Rebuking is disciplining, or verbally telling somebody something is bad, or telling them to stop it, and encourage within season. So he's saying that you need to put just with just and wrong with wrong. So encourage when it is just and rebuke when it is bad, in the lens of the teachings of Jesus. Jesus, solid doctrine. But he said, it also says, be careful, for a time will come, and this is in 3, when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers, to say what their itching ears want to hear. So yeah, he's referring to preaching. Like I said, this is more of leadership, because you got to consider churches were a hub. They were a communal gathering place where people would get together and be near each other and learn together. And, well, you have people that are going to abuse that. We see that today. We see lots of cults. That's nothing new. Cults and false religions and corrupt religions and bad teachers, nothing new. It's been going on. You got to consider when the Bible was written. And this was going on since before the birth of Christ. There is also mention of following false leaders and mention of false leaders in the Old Testament as well. But more notably, the reason why I refer to Timothy in this is because of our social media and influencer platforms that are out there, and YouTube. I love YouTube. I'm posting on YouTube mainly because it's free. It's free for me. It's free for you. And the thing being is that, you have all these conspiracy theories and all this, and we get caught up into that. We also get caught up into our news programs where they'll tell you only half of this or half of that. And it's on both sides. When it comes to our politics, the right come out with their narrative, and they sometimes leave part of the truth out to suit their own narrative. But you also got to realize that the left does that too. The left's media also leaves out and massages data. So what does that come down to? It comes down to our social media as a whole, our news media as a whole. They're not giving you the whole truth, so it's not sound doctrine, because it has to be the whole truth to be sound. And we're going to put our ears, whichever one is singing the song that we want to listen to. People, I encourage you to round out your information gathering, because it will surprise you how many misquotes come out, how many portions that are cut from an actual interview that paints a narrative. And you can see this in your reality TV that's so big right now, that it's all in the editing to create drama. And we do the same thing. We're like one giant reality show on our news media. You have to be careful. Me personally, I actually go outside of the country and listen to news sources outside of our country, because they don't care. They don't care about right or left. They preach it almost how it is, because they see both sides. They look through the wide angle lens. And sometimes you see things that you're like, yeah, I'm glad to see that. And sometimes you're like, ugh, I wished I hadn't seen that, but I have, and I need to be on guard because I'm not getting the full truth. So we have to seek the sound doctrine out. We have to seek out the good things in our lives, and the good messages for our lives. We have to seek that out. It's not going to come up on you. You got to look for it. People are, even with the church, I have lots of problems with how churches are ran, but a lot of them are just looking for money. And you have to seek out a good church. You have to seek out a good church that cares about you and your eternal soul, not what your pocketbook has in it. So be of good mind. This is a warning to people to not just trust every little thing you hear, but look at it through the lens of the Bible, test it against the Word, and look for it yourself. Read the Bible for yourself, and you'll know a lot better. I have friends that just don't want to do it. They'll tell me what it says, but they've never read it, and they don't get in there. They misinterpret it all over the place. They don't get in and read it, but they want to act like they're an authority on it. And if you look, also in 2 Timothy, this is what we want to strive. We want to go away from these things. So in 2 Timothy 3, there's a lot of threes in these ones that I've been finding. But mark this: there will be terrible times in the last days. People will love be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of good, treacherous, rash, conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power, have nothing to do with such people. There's not much misunderstanding what Timothy is saying there. He's telling us to watch out who you hang out with. He never said that money, lovers of, or that money was bad. He never said wealth was bad. He said lovers of these things. People that put them above everything. I will run into kids once in a while when I teach, and they'll note that I am of more of an advanced age, and I've been married I'm at 30 years, coming up on 30 years. Actually 29 this year, but 30, coming up on 30 years of marriage. And they'll ask me, what is the secret to a long marriage? What's the secret to that? And I'll tell you here, I'll proclaim it. Put God first. Do it God's way. Put God first. Take yourself off of a pedestal. There are so many times that I've had to humble myself, had to learn how to do this. I have a strong personality. I'll tell you what's up real fast. And I've had to learn, and this is what God does though. Whenever you get in the Word and you get with God, He starts rounding those edges. And I have still plenty of things to work on. But for the most part, I have become a more loving person. And trust me, in marriage, you got to have what's called sacrificial love. What that means is that it is not about you, it's about your spouse. You put them first. You put God above all of that. So you put God first, your spouse first, then your kids, then you. That order. Because here's what's going on with our kids today. The foundation's gone. We take God out of the schools. Right? All right, separation of church and state. Bam, we're not teaching about, all right? We're not going to teach them moral law. We're going to teach them just, regular skills. Now we're getting away from that. Even now, we're teaching them what sex they are, what their gender is. We're trying to, the schools are trying to take the raising away from parents. The government is trying to take, the parent's ability to be a parent away. So guess what? We're taking that respect between a child and their parents out. We've been working on it for a long time. It's just gotten worse. You chip away from the foundation of any house and it's going to fall. And that's what we're doing. We're chipping away from the parents and the children and the parents' right to raise their children. Our government is getting into the home. Then we have our TV. You can't look anywhere. I can't go to a beach without pretty much seeing, nudity just about. The way that people dress today. And listen, I get women should be able to dress whatever way they want. And I'm not even just talking about women. I'm talking about men too. But whenever you don't leave anything to the imagination, what are you saying? My body, my right? Well, no, you're actually almost prostituting yourself. Think about it. The Bible talks about this, and I didn't look it up, I meant to and I forgot. But the reality of it is our bodies are the temples of God. And if we treat them as such, then we'll have some worth. You should be and feel worthy enough of yourself to not sleep around and have a lot of partners. In fact, should have enough self-worth to wait till marriage. And I'm not talking about girls, I'm talking about boys and girls. So don't think that I'm being chauvinistic. I'm talking about everybody. You don't have to dress so scantily that there's nothing left to the imagination, nothing left for the marriage bed. That's what I'm saying. If we would turn and start building that foundation of marriage back, then and building our foundation of raising our children back, you will see an improvement in society because you have values. And this is a science experiment that you're seeing playing out for yourself. This isn't me being judgmental, old school, unevolved, or outdated. You can see it for yourself in society today that our kids are lost. They're lost. And they're becoming toxic because they're lost. Kids need leaders. They don't need friends. So you put God first. You put his laws first. All right? That's going to be a positive impact in your life. And there's rewards to that. God rewards you for your obedience. And I'm not saying do it for the reward, but I'm saying that there's perks to it. One is you're less likely to get a disease. You're less likely to get a sexually transmitted disease if you can keep it in your pants, or keep, and I mean that both ways, boys and girls, keep it in your pants, literally. Honor your body in that way. Be honorable to yourself, that you're building a sense of self-respect, that I don't got to do this to get this. I don't have to sleep with him, or I don't have to get her pregnant for her to stay with me or for him to stay with me. This happens all the time. It's not a chauvinistic thing. It's not an old school thing. I see this. People see this playing out in our society today. Sexual entrapment. It's horrible. Second of all, don't make it about sex. If you can do that, then don't make it about sex. Make it about your relationship, and make it about being your friends. You need to be friends, because trust me, everything gets ugly. And you better like that person, because that lust that brought you together, well, it turns in you've got to have love to carry it through. If you don't have that, your marriage will fail. We see a lustful marriage cycle right now. Look at our divorce rates. They're getting near 60%. 60% of people have divorces. Marry for the right reasons. Don't marry just because of that moment. Oh, I'm going to marry her. She's hot. She's beautiful. Oh, I'm going to marry him. He's muscular. I'm living proof. As you get older, that stuff goes away. You better love them for who they are. You better love them not for what they have, but for who they are and what kind of friend they are to you, because that's what makes it last, is the friendship. Real sacrificial love for each other. And then if you have that, guess what? That moves into your kids, because you start backing each other up. You start becoming a united front. No longer do we have the society where kids get whatever they want because they play mom and dad against each other, because you're a united front. This is what happens when a divorce is present now. The kids figure it out. Mom is competing for their attention. Dad's competing for their attention. So they're getting everything they want, and they're not getting what they need. They need solid foundational love, not I'm going to get you this toy, or I'm going to give you this gift card for your love. See, they're learning exchange love. Transactional love is not real love. It's shaky, forgettable love. Folks, if we can start investing in our kids, and I'm just telling you a few things, our society will get better, because you know what? We got to have kids to go forth for us. We're going to die. And what we leave behind is what matters. How we view ourselves matters. How we love ourselves matters. And I'm not talking about loving yourself above everybody else. I'm just talking about having respect for yourself. If you don't respect and love yourself, you can't love anybody. If you can't love yourself, you're not going to love very good in life. All right. For now, we're going to get into a part 3 next week, but love yourself. Look to God for the guidance. It's weird how it all plays together. But in a lot of ways, the Bible, God, honoring the laws, teaches you to love yourself. And that's going to give you a better life. That's going to give you the best. God wants the best for you. All right. I'll talk to you all next week. Love you.